Picture this. Moscow, November 1972. A photograph lies on a desk in a secure room deep inside GRU headquarters. The building's brutalist concrete walls block out the weak afternoon sun, but inside fluorescent lights cast harsh shadows across the grainy black and white image. The photograph shows an American fighter jet
Listen
unlike
carefully.
anything Soviet intelligence
We
has
need to
ever
move
seen
quickly.
before. Twin tails, massive air intakes, clean, purposeful lines that speak of speed and power combined. The man studying this photograph is Colonel Viktor Belov. He's 47 years old with gray, threading through dark hair that he keeps military short. 3 small scars mark his left cheek from shrapnel, Stalingrad 1943. 2 medals rest in a drawer of his desk, rarely worn. His hands calloused and steady from years of engineering work before he became an analyst, now tremble slightly as he holds the photograph closer to the light. Not from fear, from recognition. He has felt this exact sensation once before. 27 years earlier, April 1945, just outside Berlin. Lieutenant Viktor Belov, 20 years old, then walked through a captured Luftwaffe airfield with his Red Army unit. The smell of aviation fuel mixed with smoke from burning buildings. Spring mud sucked at his boots. He carried a Mosin Nagant rifle in a tin cup of what the supply sergeant called coffee, though it was mostly roasted grain and bitterness. Among the wreckage of conventional fighters, one aircraft stood intact. The Messerschmitt Me-262, the world's first operational jet fighter. Victor stopped walking, just stopped mid-stride staring. The aircraft's swept wings caught the morning light. Twin jet engines hung beneath them like promises of a future that had arrived too soon for Germany, too late for the Third Reich. The metal skin gleamed despite the mud and chaos around it. A German engineer stood nearby, thin, hollow-eyed from hunger, hands in pockets of a stained Luftwaffe ground crew jacket. He watched the young Soviet soldier approach the jet. "Schön, ja," the German said quietly. Beautiful, yes. Victor didn't speak German well, but he understood that word. He nodded. The engineer continued in broken Russian. 2 years too late. If we had 3 more years. He trailed off, shrugging with the resignation of a man who'd lost everything. Young Victor stared at those twin engines, at the clean aerodynamic form, at the future sitting in the mud of a defeated nation, and he felt it in his gut, that sinking sensation. The feeling of seeing tomorrow and knowing you're already behind. The feeling of understanding that somewhere someone had solved problems you didn't even know existed yet. He raised his tin cup, sipped bitter ersatz coffee, and made a silent vow. Never again would he be surprised by an enemy's technology. Never again would he underestimate what motivated intelligent engineers could achieve when pressed by necessity. Now November 1972. Sitting in his Moscow office, Victor feels that same sensation. Worse this time, because now he knows enough to understand implications. The F-15 Eagle. That's what American intelligence sources call it. McDonnell Douglas design. First flight just months ago, entering production soon. Victor reaches for his coffee. Real coffee, now a privilege of rank. But it has gone cold. Outside his window, Moscow winter descends early this year. First snow already coating the city. Inside, a different kind of cold settles into his bones. He studies the photograph again. Those twin tails aren't just for show. They indicate advanced flight control systems. The large air intakes suggest powerful engines, probably with thrust-to-weight ratios that Soviet metallurgy struggles to achieve. The clean fuselage speaks of careful attention to drag reduction to sustained speed and maneuverability. Soviet design bureaus have always treated those qualities as mutually exclusive. You build fast interceptors like the MiG-25 capable of Mach 3, but turning like a freight train. Or you build agile fighters like the MiG-21 nimble, but limited in range and weapons load. Not both. Never both. The Americans, it appears, have done both. Victor lights a cigarette. His third this morning, and it's only 10:30. His office is small, lined with filing cabinets full of reports spanning decades. Aviation analysis, American bomber development, fighter evolution, strategic assessments. On the wall, a single photograph in a simple frame. His wife Elena, who died 2 years ago after a long illness. Cancer, the best Soviet medicine couldn't save her. He misses her, would have talked through this with her. She was school teacher, not engineer, but she understood how to think clearly about difficult problems. "Tell me what worries you most," she would say. "Not the surface worry, The deep one. What worries Victor most about the F-15 isn't just its capabilities. It's what those capabilities represent. American industry has achieved something. Manufacturing precision across thousands of components. Quality control that yields consistent results. Integration of complex systems into a coherent whole. The preliminary intelligence reports suggest thrust-to-weight ratio exceeding 1-to-1 at combat weight. That means this fighter can accelerate while climbing vertically, can sustain turns without bleeding energy, can out-climb out, turn out, run anything while carrying a full weapons load. The radar system designated APG-63 uses technologies Soviet electronics industry cannot yet replicate at this scale. Solid-state components, advanced signal processing, look-down, shoot-down capability that eliminates the traditional sanctuary of low-altitude flight. Victor opens a folder on his desk. Inside, more photographs. Technical drawings obtained through various intelligence means. Specifications, performance estimates. He has spent 3 months assembling this information, analyzing it, cross-referencing it against Soviet capabilities. His conclusion is stark. The Americans have changed the rules of air combat. They have built a pure air superiority platform designed for one mission above all others: destroying enemy aircraft. He reaches for the telephone. Black heavy secure line. This call will be difficult. How do you tell engineers who have spent their entire careers building interceptors that the Americans have just obsoleted your entire design philosophy? How do you tell military planners that the capability gap they've been comfortable with has just widened into a chasm? How do you tell your own son, a MiG-25 pilot, that his aircraft for all its speed cannot compete with what's coming? Victor's son Alexei is 23, brilliant pilot, top of his class at flight school, assigned to the MiG-25 Foxbat program, the pride of Soviet aviation. Fastest interceptor in the world. Mach 3 capability, designed to shoot down American bombers at high altitude. But the F-15 isn't a bomber, and speed in a straight line isn't enough when your opponent can see you first shoot first and maneuver better if you somehow survive the first engagement. Victor stubs out his cigarette, lights another, picks up the phone. The call goes through to General Sokolov, his direct superior. Career officer, veteran of the Great Patriotic War. Good man, practical, but also political, as everyone at that level must be. Comrade General, it's Belov. I need to schedule a briefing on the American F-15 program. Pause. Victor can hear papers rustling on the other end. I received your preliminary assessment, Victor. It's concerning. The full report is ready, sir. 500 pages, technical analysis, strategic implications, recommendations. Another pause. Longer. Your recommendations include accelerating the MiG-29 and Su-27 programs, significantly increase funding, reform training procedures. You're asking for major resource reallocation. Yes, sir. The Politburo won't like it. Victor chooses his words carefully. The Politburo doesn't have to like it, Comrade General. They have to prepare for it. The Americans are building an aircraft we cannot counter with current capabilities. This isn't speculation. This is engineering reality. How long until they're operational? Best estimate 18 months to 2 years. Small numbers initially, but production will scale. They're planning hundreds of aircraft. Silence on the line. Victor can imagine Sokolov in his office, weighing political considerations against military necessity. Finally, submit your full report. I'll forward it up the chain. But prepare for resistance, Victor. People don't want to hear that we're behind. I've been hearing that for 27 years, sir. Since I was 20 years old, standing in a German airfield looking at a jet fighter my country couldn't build yet. You think this is like the Me-262? Worse, sir. The Me-262 came too late for Germany. The F-15 comes at the peak of American industrial power. They can build as many as they want. We'll be playing catch-up for a decade. Sokolov sighs. Submit the report. The line goes dead. Victor sits back in his chair, looks at Elena's photograph, wishes he could ask her opinion. She would tell him he's doing the right thing. Speaking truth, even uncomfortable truth, is duty. He opens his desk drawer, pulls out a journal. Personal notes, not official reports. He writes in neat Cyrillic, November 15, 1972. The photograph arrived today. F-15 Eagle. I was right to be concerned. This changes everything. The Americans have built what we thought impossible. Combined maneuverability with beyond visual range capability. Married excellent airframe to sophisticated systems. Created air superiority platform without compromise. Our response programs are years behind. The MiG-29 shows promise but won't be operational until early 1980s. The Su-27 even further out. We face a capability gap that could prove decisive if war comes. I think of Alexei flying his Foxbat, proud of its speed, believing in Soviet superiority. How do I tell my son that his aircraft, magnificent as it is, cannot compete with what's coming? That all his skill, all his training, all his courage won't overcome the systemic advantages the Americans have built. I remember the German engineer in 1945, his hollow eyes, his resignation. 2 years too late. Will that be us? 10 years too late. Victor closes the journal, locks it in his desk. The afternoon light fades. Moscow winter darkness comes early. He should go home, but his apartment is empty now. Elena gone. Alexei on duty at his airbase. Just Victor and his books and his reports and his growing certainty that the world has shifted beneath Soviet aviation, and most people haven't noticed yet. He gathers the photographs, the technical drawings, the performance estimates, files them carefully. Tomorrow he'll present the full briefing to General Sokolov and his staff. They'll listen, they'll ask questions, they'll probably resist his conclusions because accepting them means accepting uncomfortable truths. But Victor will persist, because that's what good analysts do. They tell truth, they show evidence, they make recommendations based on reality, not wishful thinking. He pulls on his coat, heavy wool, still cold in Moscow November. Steps out of his office into the corridor. Other analysts working late lights still on in their offices. The GRU never really sleeps. Outside, snow falls harder now. Victor walks to the metro station. The city moves around him. People heading home from work. Students hurrying to evening classes. Babushkas carrying net bags of groceries. Life continuing unaware that 6,000 miles away in the California desert, American engineers have built something that will reshape the strategic balance for decades. Victor boards the metro. The car is crowded. He stands holding a rail, swaying with the train's movement. Thinks about his son, about the MiG-25 and the F-15, about two aircraft representing two different philosophies of air combat, about which philosophy will prevail. He knows the answer, has known since he saw that first photograph. But knowledge doesn't make it easier. The metro reaches his stop. He exits into snow and wind. Walks 3 blocks to his apartment building. Soviet concrete brutalism. Functional. Gray. Home. Inside, he makes tea. Strong black tea the way Elena taught him. Sits at his small kitchen table. Opens the evening paper but doesn't read it. His mind is elsewhere. Somewhere over the Pacific Ocean, intelligence reports are being compiled. American test flights generating data. Production lines being established. Training programs being developed. An entire ecosystem of air superiority being constructed piece by piece with the F-15 Eagle at its center. And in Moscow, Viktor Belov, who has spent his adult life studying American aviation, knows that his country is not prepared for what's coming. Not technically, not doctrinally, not economically. The question isn't whether the Americans will achieve air superiority. The question is how long it will take Soviet responses to close the gap. 5 years, 10, 15. Victor drinks his tea. It's getting late. Tomorrow will be a difficult day, but he's faced difficult days before. Stalingrad, the siege of Leningrad, the long war against Nazi Germany. Those experiences taught him something essential. Truth matters. Reality doesn't care about ideology or wishful thinking. The laws of physics and engineering apply equally to everyone. The Americans have understood something profound about integrating systems for air combat. Until the Soviet Union understands it equally well, the gap will persist. He finishes his tea, washes the cup, prepares for bed. But sleep doesn't come easily. Instead, Victor lies awake thinking about 2 aircraft separated by geography and purpose. The MiG-25 his son flies. The F-15 the Americans are building. and about the men who will eventually fly them against each other if the Cold War ever turns hot. He hopes it never does, because he knows with the certainty of a professional analyst who has studied these matters for decades what the outcome would be. Not because Soviet pilots lack courage. They have courage in abundance. Not because Soviet aircraft are poorly designed. They're excellent within their design parameters. But because the Americans have built something different, a complete system. And in modern air combat systems defeat individual components. Better radar defeats better maneuverability. Longer range missiles defeat higher top speed. Superior training defeats rigid doctrine. The F-15 represents all of these advantages integrated into a single platform. Victor's last thought before finally drifting into uneasy sleep: how many Soviet pilots will die learning this lesson if war comes? 6,000 miles west. Dawn breaks over the California desert. Edwards Air Force Base emerges from darkness into golden morning light. The sky is that particular shade of blue that only desert skies achieve. Clear, infinite, perfect for flying. Lieutenant Colonel James Mitchell, call sign Tex, stands outside Hangar 7. He's 35 years old. Lean build from years of military fitness. Lines around his eyes from squinting into bright skies. Hands that know aircraft controls by feel more than thought. He holds a thermos of coffee. Not good coffee. Base commissary coffee, which means it was brewed sometime yesterday, reheated this morning, and tastes like diesel fuel mixed with regret. But Tex drinks it anyway. It's a ritual. His father worked oil rigs in West Texas, drank terrible coffee on night shifts, came home smelling of crude oil and sweat and hard work. Taught young James that coffee isn't about taste. It's about staying alert, doing your job, getting it right. Tex learned that lesson well, applied it to flying, to combat, to life. He sips the terrible coffee and studies the aircraft visible through Hangar 7's open doors. The F-15 Eagle, still in test phase, months from operational deployment, but already unmistakably a masterpiece. Not just because it's beautiful, though it is. Clean lines, purposeful design, form following function with elegant efficiency. Not just because it's powerful, though it is. Those Pratt & Whitney F-100 engines represent the cutting edge of American turbofan technology. The F-15 is a masterpiece because it's vindication. Tex flew F-4 Phantoms over North Vietnam, 68-69, 2 tours, saw things that still wake him at night sometimes. Lost friends, good men, skilled pilots, dead because doctrine limited their options. Missiles only, no guns, standoff engagement. That was the rule. The F-4 was designed around that rule. Big, fast, carried lots of missiles, but not maneuverable. No internal cannon. If you got into a turning fight with a MiG, you were in trouble. June 1968. Tex remembers the date, remembers the sky, remembers the radio call. Viper 2 is defensive MiG on my 6 cannot shake Texas wingman, Captain Bobby Torres from San Antonio. Good pilot, family man, 2 daughters, wife pregnant with their 3rd child. The MiG-17 was older than the Phantom, slower in a straight line, but more maneuverable, and in a turning fight, maneuverability matters more than speed. Bobby tried everything, broke hard, used afterburners, tried to extend and reset, but the MiG stayed with him, got inside his turn radius, fired cannons. Tex watched smoke pour from Bobby's F-4, watched the ejection sequence, 2 seats firing, 2 parachutes deploying, watched them drift down into triple canopy jungle, into North Vietnam, into captivity. Bobby spent 4 years in Hanoi Hilton, came home in 1973, 40 pounds lighter, eyes that had seen things no man should see, still wakes up screaming sometimes, according to mutual friends. That day in 1968, watching his wingman eject Tex made a vow, a silent promise to Bobby, to himself, to every American pilot who'd faced enemy fighters with inadequate tools. If I survive this war, I'll fight to build a better fighter. An aircraft that can do everything, missiles and guns, beyond visual range and knife fight. Never again will American pilots die because their aircraft limited their options. Now standing outside Hangar 7 in California desert morning, Tex has that aircraft. The F-15 carries AIM-7 Sparrow missiles for beyond visual range engagement, carries AIM-9 Sidewinders for close range, and carries a 20mm M61 Vulcan cannon with 600 rounds. Can fight at any range, any altitude, any speed regime. Can turn with anything. Can outclimb everything. Can sustain energy in maneuvering flight that leaves opponents helpless. Tex sips terrible coffee and smiles. It's a smile Bobby Torres would understand. The smile of a man who's seen the cost of inadequacy and now holds excellence in his hands. Morning, Tex. He turns. Robert Chen approaches carrying his own thermos and a clipboard thick with technical documents. Everyone calls him Bobby, though he prefers Robert. Bobby Chen, 28 years old, aerospace engineer, McDonnell Douglas Quality Control Supervisor for the F-15 program. Bobby represents something quintessentially American. His parents fled China in 1947, arrived in San Francisco with one suitcase and determination. Father opened a small machine shop in Chinatown. Mother worked as seamstress. They lived in 3 rooms above the shop, saved every penny, invested in their son's education. Young Bobby grew up in that machine shop. Age 8, he could operate a lathe. Age 12, he understood tolerance measurements better than men twice his age. Age 16, he knew the difference between adequate and excellent, knew that precision matters, quality matters. That gap between good enough and perfect is where greatness lives. He earned an engineering degree from UC Berkeley, full scholarship, top of his class, joined at McDonnell Douglas immediately after graduation. Now he's responsible for ensuring that every F-15 component meets specifications, that every system integrates properly. That quality remains consistent across production. It's responsibility he takes seriously. His father's words echo in his work. In China, good enough is good enough. In America, perfect is the standard. That's why we came here. Bobby stops beside Tex. They stand together, 2 Americans from different backgrounds, united by purpose, building the best fighter aircraft in the world. Want real coffee? Bobby asks, offering his thermos. None of that commissary diesel fuel. Tex accepts gratefully. Pours a cup. The smell alone is better. Rich, properly brewed. Bobby's mother makes it Chinese-style, strong and dark with condensed milk added. Tex sips. It's excellent. Your mother's recipe. Every morning, she insists, says American coffee is too weak, but American standards are perfect, so she makes Chinese coffee to American standards. They both smile. Immigration's success story in a thermos. Bobby pulls out a component from his jacket pocket. It's a turbine blade from an F-100 engine. He hands it to Tex. See this tolerance? Bobby points to the edge. 0.005 inches. Consistently. Every blade. Every engine. Tex examines it. The blade gleams in morning sun. Perfect curve, perfect balance. The product of American aerospace manufacturing at its peak. That's remarkable precision. That's American precision, Bobby says with quiet pride. My father's machine shop in Chinatown can almost hit these tolerances. Almost, on individual pieces. But at scale, hundreds of engines, thousands of blades, only American aerospace industry can do this. Consistently, reliably, every single time. He pulls out another item from his pocket, a brass caliper old and worn smooth from decades of use. My father gave me this when I graduated Berkeley. It's his machinist's caliper. Used it for 40 years in his shop. He said American tools, American standards, American precision. That's what makes the difference, and Bobby carries that caliper everywhere. It's a reminder, heritage and aspiration combined. They walk toward the hangar. The F-15 waits inside morning light reflecting off its metallic skin. It looks eager, ready, like it wants to fly. Bobby runs his hand along the fuselage. His touch is reverent. This isn't just an aircraft to him. It's proof. Proof that American system works. That precision and quality and systematic excellence produce results that cannot be matched through shortcuts or propaganda. This aircraft, Bobby says quietly, represents 18 different American companies, 3,000 suppliers, 50,000 workers, every single one of them held to highest standard, because American pilots deserve the best. Tex nods, thinks about Bobby Torres, about all the pilots who didn't come home from Vietnam, about the promise he made. Will it work, Bobby? Can we really achieve all these specifications consistently? Bobby meets his eyes. We already have techs. The question isn't, can we build it? We built it. The question is, can we maintain this quality at scale across hundreds of aircraft for years? And the answer is yes. Because that's what separates American aerospace industry from everyone else. Not just building one perfect prototype, building hundreds of them, consistently, reliably, with supply chains and quality control and systematic excellence that others cannot replicate. The morning sun climbs higher, the California desert begins to heat, but inside Hangar 7, climate control maintains perfect temperature, perfect humidity, everything optimized for precision work. The test team begins arriving, engineers, technicians, specialists in radar avionics, flight controls, weapon systems, each an expert, each committed to excellence. Master Sergeant Rodriguez, crew chief, approaches techs. He's 50 years old, veteran of multiple wars. His father maintained B-17 bombers in World War II. Rodriguez himself worked on F-86 Sabres in Korea. Now he maintains F-15 MOS. Morning, Colonel. She's ready for you. Thanks, Sergeant. How's she looking? Rodriguez grins. Sir, I've maintained aircraft for 30 years. My father did it for 20 before me. He pats the F-15's landing gear. This is the finest bird I've ever touched. Everything perfect. Everything right. Bring her home safe. That's the plan. Tex climbs the ladder to the cockpit, settles into the ejection seat. The cockpit wraps around him. Everything positioned perfectly. Controls fall naturally to hand. Instruments clear and logical. The result of decades of American aerospace experience, refined and perfected. He runs pre-flight checklist. Bobby's team has checked every system twice. Everything green, everything nominal. Master Sergeant Rodriguez personally checks Tex's harness. Makes sure every connection is secure. This is ritual, but important ritual. Details matter. You're good to go, sir. Show us what she can do. Tex gives thumbs up. Rodriguez descends the ladder, removes it, gives final visual inspection. He's done this thousands of times, but never carelessly. Every time matters. Every flight is important. Canopy closes. The seal is tight. Perfect. Cockpit goes quiet except for electronics, hum, and Tex's breathing in the oxygen mask. He studies the instruments one more time. Everything exactly as it should be. This is American aerospace engineering at its peak. Systematic excellence producing reliable perfection. Engine start sequence. The Pratt & Whitney F-100 turbofans begin their spool up. That distinctive sound. Whine rising to roar. Power building, potential becoming kinetic. Tex feels it through the seat. The vibration, the raw power. These engines represent cutting edge of American turbofan technology. Variable geometry, advanced materials. Thrust vectoring concepts that will evolve further in future variants. But even in this early version, they're magnificent. Responsive, powerful, reliable. Tower clears him for taxi. He releases, brakes advances, throttles slightly. The F-15 rolls forward smoothly, perfectly balanced, everything coordinated, taxiing to runway. The California desert spreads around Edwards like proof of concept. This is where American aerospace proves itself, where theories become flight, where excellence gets tested against reality. Tex reaches runway threshold, performs final checks. Everything perfect. Tower Eagle 01 cleared for takeoff. 01 rolling. Throttles forward. The F-15 accelerates like it's been shot from catapult. Rotation speed comes almost faster than Tex expected, though he's studied the numbers. Knowing intellectually and experiencing physically are different things. Airborne. Gear up. Climbing. The F-15 wants to climb. Needs to climb. Like returning to natural element. Tex feels it immediately. This isn't just another aircraft. This is something new. Something special. The controls are responsive but stable. Power is available at any throttle setting. Acceleration is instantaneous. The flight test card calls for systematic exploration. Level flight at various speeds. Gentle turns. Progressive load building. But Tex already knows, can feel it in his hands. This aircraft is everything they promised. Everything Vietnam lessons demanded. Everything American aerospace could achieve when properly motivated. 6G turn, sustained. The F-15 holds energy, doesn't bleed speed like F-4 Phantoms did, maintains turn rate and velocity simultaneously. 7G, 8G, 9G sustained turn. Physics becomes poetry, engineering becomes art. American innovation becomes dominance. In a sustained 9G turn, the F-15 maintains energy, outturns anything while keeping speed, outclimbs everything while turning, does what Soviet designers thought impossible. Tex thinks about Viktor Belov in Moscow, studying photographs, understanding implications. Thinks about MiG-25 pilots believing in their aircraft's speed. Thinks about the gap between perception and reality. This aircraft will teach that gap to everyone who faces it. He keys the radio. Edwards Tower test pilot, all specifications exceeded. This bird is everything we hoped for and more. Descending now, landing pattern, everything smooth. The F-15 handles perfectly throughout the envelope. From takeoff to landing, from slow speed to supersonic, from sea level to stratosphere. Touchdown, smooth, perfect. Tex taxis back to Hangar 7. Bobby Chen's team waits, so does Master Sergeant Rodriguez. They read Tex's face as he climbs out. Before he says anything, they know. Success. Bobby, well, Tex pulls off his helmet, grins. Bobby, you built a masterpiece. This is exactly what American aerospace does best. Take lessons from hard experience, apply systematic excellence, produce something that changes everything. That evening, the test team gathers at Edwards Officers Club. It's informal celebration. Not official, but important. Tex buys first round, Bobby buys second. Someone produces a bottle of Jack Daniels. Tennessee whiskey, American tradition. They toast to the Eagle. Chief engineer raises his glass. Gentlemen, we just built the aircraft that will dominate skies for the next 50 years. Some laugh. They think he's exaggerating. He isn't. 6,000 miles east, Viktor Belov sits in his Moscow apartment, alone. The intelligence report on his desk confirms F-15 test program success. All tests successful, all specifications met or exceeded. Production authorization expected within months. Viktor lights a cigarette, stares at Moscow darkness through his window, snow falling, winter deepening. He picks up his secure phone, calls his son Alexei at his airbase. Son, I need you to do something for me. Yes, father. Tomorrow when you fly the Foxbat, I want detailed notes. Turn performance, energy retention, radar capability, everything. Why, pai? Viktor pauses, chooses words carefully. Because the Americans just changed the game, and we need to understand how far behind we are. Alexei Belov flew the MiG-25 Foxbat the next morning over the Caspian Sea. 23 years old, born after Stalin's death, raised in Khrushchev's thaw, came of age believing Soviet technology equaled or surpassed the West. His father's caution seemed like old generation thinking shaped by wartime scarcity rather than Soviet industrial achievement. The Foxbat cockpit wrapped around him like a second skin. He knew every dial, every switch, every response characteristic. This aircraft was fast, magnificently, impossibly fast. Mach 2.8 in level flight, Mach 3 in a slight dive. Nothing in Western arsenals could catch it. Alexei pushed the throttles forward. The Tumansky R-15 engines, massive turbojets gulping fuel at prodigious rates, responded with brutal acceleration. The airspeed indicator climbed. Mach 1, Mach 2, Mach 2.5. Pure speed, pure power. This is what Soviet engineering achieved. Ground control Falcon lead maintained current heading. Target drones approaching from west. Alexei's radar operator, Lieutenant Grekov, sitting behind him in the two-seat variant, studied his scope. The RP-25 Smerch radar was powerful, crude by later standards but effective against high-altitude bombers, which is what the MiG-25 was designed to intercept. American B-70 Valkyries, except the B-70 program was canceled. The mission the Foxbat was built for no longer existed, but Soviet Air Force kept producing them anyway, because they were fast, because they looked impressive in air shows, because admitting the design was obsolete before it became operational would be politically difficult. Alexei locked up a target drone, simulated missile launch, perfect intercept geometry. Ground control. Good kill Falcon lead, RTB, when ready. Returning to base. Alexei reduced throttle. The Foxbat's engines were temperamental. Couldn't be shut down and restarted in flight. Had to be managed carefully. And the fuel consumption was enormous. Combat radius was limited. Time on station minimal. Alexei knew these limitations, but he loved the aircraft anyway. Loved the speed, loved the power, loved being fastest pilot and fastest interceptor in Soviet inventory. Landing, debriefing, then following his father's request detailed notes. Turn performance at various speeds. Energy retention during maneuvers. Radar capabilities and limitations. Writing those notes, Alexei began to see what his father saw. The Foxbat could intercept bombers flying straight and level at high altitude, but against a maneuverable fighter, against an opponent who could turn and climb and maintain energy, the Foxbat would be at severe disadvantage. Alexei finished his notes, sealed them in an envelope, mailed them to his father in Moscow, included a brief letter. "Father, I understand your concern now. The Foxbat is magnificent at what it was designed to do. But if the American F-15 can do everything, our specialization becomes limitation. We built the fastest interceptor. They built the most complete fighter. In a contest, completeness defeats specialization. Your son, Alexei." Victor received that letter 3 days later. Read it twice. Felt pride mixed with sorrow. Pride that his son understood. Sorrow that understanding brought no comfort. The gap between Soviet and American aviation philosophy was widening, and Victor could see no easy way to close it. Meanwhile, in California, production of the F-15 accelerated. The factory in St. Louis began full-scale manufacturing. American Aerospace Workers Union, men and women with decades of collective experience, built these fighters with systematic precision. The assembly line hummed with coordinated activity. Each station performed specific tasks. Each worker knew their role. Quality control inspections happened at every stage. Nothing advanced to next station until it met specifications. This was American manufacturing at its finest, not just building one perfect prototype, building hundreds, thousands eventually, maintaining quality across scale, sustaining excellence through systematic process. Bobby Chen walked that production line regularly, his caliper always in his pocket, his father's gift. Reminder of precision's importance. He stopped at engine installation station. Watched technicians mount F-100 engines to airframe. Everything aligned perfectly. Every bolt torqued to exact specification. Every connection verified twice. The shift supervisor, a woman named Margaret Cooper, approached with her own clipboard. She'd worked aerospace manufacturing for 30 years. Started as riveter during Vietnam buildup. Worked her way up through skill and determination. "Mr. Chen, inspection of airframe 1847 complete. All tolerances within spec. No defects noted." Bobby reviewed her documentation. Perfect, as expected. Margaret's work always was. "Excellent, Mrs. Cooper. That's what we expect. That's what American pilots deserve." Margaret nodded. "My brother flew F-4s over Hanoi. Lost too many friends to aircraft limitations. This bird," she patted the F-15's fuselage, "this bird brings them home." Every worker on that production line understood. This wasn't just a job. This was mission. Building the best fighter in the world, so American pilots had every advantage. January 1976. The F-15 entered operational service with the United States Air Force. First operational squadron stood up at Langley Air Force Base, Virginia. Tex Mitchell, now a training instructor, helped transition pilots to the Eagle. The first operational squadron launch was moment of history. 24 F-15 Chardonnets taking off in formation. The sound alone was magnificent. Power multiplied. Excellence at scale. Tex stood on the flight line watching. Thought about Bobby Torres finally home from Vietnam, recovering slowly from his captivity. Thought about all the pilots who didn't come home. Thought about the promise he made in 1968. "We're not losing anyone else to aircraft limitations." The F-15 was that promise kept. That evening squadron celebration at Langley Officers Club, traditional American military gathering. Steaks, beer, bourbon, laughter and stories. Families welcome. Kids running around between tables while pilots swapped flying tails. Tex's wife Sarah was there. They'd married in 1970 between his Vietnam tours. She understood what this aircraft meant to him, understood the ghosts he carried. She squeezed his hand. You did it. You and Bobby Chen and everyone else built something that matters. Tex nodded. Now we make sure pilots are worthy of it. Training became Tex's focus, teaching young pilots not just how to fly the F-15, but how to think, how to use its capabilities fully, how to make decisions in dynamic combat environments. This was different from Soviet training philosophy. Soviet doctrine emphasized centralized control. Ground controllers directed interceptors to targets. Pilots executed instructions. The system thought. Pilots acted. American doctrine emphasized pilot judgment. Give them better sensors, better weapons, better aircraft. Then trust them to make good decisions. The individual thought. The system supported. Two philosophies, two approaches. Eventually they would be tested against each other. Jump forward. June 1982, Lebanon. Major Rashid al-Zahrani woke before dawn at his Syrian Air Force base, performed ritual prayers facing Mecca, then walked to officers' mess for breakfast. The Soviets who trained him had taught Syrian pilots their breakfast culture. Strong black tea, dark bread, cheese, occasionally sausage or fish. Al-Zahrani had spent 2 years at Krasnodar Air Force Academy in Russia. Excellent training, professional instructors. He'd learned Soviet methods thoroughly. Now 31 years old, he was Syria's top MiG-23 pilot. Experienced, skilled, confident in his training and his aircraft. But this morning he wasn't hungry. Something felt different. Israeli Air Force activity had increased. F-15s confirmed operating in the area. Syrian High Command wanted interception capability demonstrated. Show the Israelis that Syrian airspace wasn't uncontested. Al-Zahrani and his wingman, Captain Hamza, drew the patrol assignment. WWII Valley, high threat area. In the briefing room, Soviet advisor Colonel Konstantin Petrov gave intelligence assessment. Petrov was contemporary of Viktor Belov. Same generation, same professional competence. The Israeli F-15As are formidable aircraft, Petrov said. Their pilots are aggressive, sometimes overconfident. Follow your training precisely. Maintain formation discipline. Let ground control guide you to firing position. Execute their instructions exactly. Al-Zahrani listened carefully. Soviet training had made him excellent pilot. He respected the system, trusted it. But he also knew from intelligence reports that Israeli F-15s had scored kills. Syrian aircraft destroyed, pilots killed or captured. The score was not favorable. Before the mission, Al-Zahrani wrote a brief note to his wife in Damascus. Standard procedure before dangerous missions. Beloved, if you read this, know I served with honor. Our son will grow proud of his father. Teach him that a man stands for his beliefs, his country, his people. He sealed the envelope, left it in his locker. Standard precaution. But today felt different. Same morning, Israeli Air Force Base near Tel Aviv. Colonel David Weinstein prepared for his patrol. 33 years old, second-generation Israeli. His father had survived the Holocaust in Poland, emigrated to Detroit after the war, worked at Ford Motor Company on the assembly line, believed deeply in American industrial excellence. The family moved to Israel in 1967 after the Six-Day War. David's father wanted to help defend the Jewish state, but he kept American values, American work ethic, American belief in quality. Young David grew up hearing Americans build quality into everything. We're Israeli now, but we fly American aircraft, best in the world. Honor that quality by excellence in everything you do. David applied that lesson. Israeli Air Force Academy, top of his class, fighter training, F-15 qualification, now squadron commander. His squadron had adopted American breakfast tradition, real coffee brewed American style in a Mr. Coffee machine that David's father shipped from Detroit. Eggs, toast, sometimes bacon, though most pilots weren't strictly kosher when deployed. David poured coffee from his personal machine. His weapons officer, Lieutenant Cohen, smiled. Dave, you and that coffee maker, it's like a shrine. My father worked night shift at Ford for 15 years. Said American coffee kept him alert. Keeps me alert too. Mission briefing. Intelligence officer, Syrian MiG, 23S active in WWII Valley. High probability of intercept today. Rules of engagement. Defensive posture, but if locked by Syrian radar, you're cleared to engage. David nodded, sipped his coffee, thought about Ford assembly lines. American workers building cars with precision and pride. Same workers' cousins and brothers building F-15 points in St. Louis. American quality, American excellence. Syrian pilots weren't incompetent, but they flew Soviet doctrine, Soviet aircraft, Soviet support systems. Quality matters. Systems matter. Excellence compounds. June 9, 1982. 0947 local time. Al-Zahrani's MiG-23 patrol over Bekaa Valley. His radar operator scanning for contacts. Ground control providing vectors. Falcon leader multiple contacts bearing 270 high-altitude presumed hostile. Al-Zahrani checked his radar. Nothing yet. The Sapphire 23D radar was powerful but had limitations. Detecting targets against ground clutter was difficult. Range was limited compared to Western systems. Falcon leader copies. Searching. He maintained formation exactly as trained. Followed ground control vectors. Prepared weapons. His R-23 missiles were ready. Good missiles, but needed radar lock. Effective range may be 20 kilometers in ideal conditions. David Weinstein's F-15 45 miles away. His APG-63 radar painted the Syrian formation clearly. 2 aircraft, MiG-23s, based on radar signature. Altitude speed heading displayed perfectly. American AWACS controller Viper 1 bandits at your 11 o'clock 45 miles heading east. Viper 1 has radar contact. 2 bandits, locked. Request weapons, free. Weapons free Viper 1, clear to engage. David selected AAM-7 Sparrow missile. The radar lock was solid. Perfect firing solution. Range 35 miles. The Syrian MiGs still hadn't detected him, hadn't detected the missile, hadn't detected anything. This was the gap Victor Belov had written about in 1972. Radar capability determining engagement outcomes before visual contact ever occurred. Al-Zahrani's radar warning receiver suddenly screamed, "Missile lock, missile launch." But from where his radar showed nothing, no contacts, no threats, nothing. Ground control, Falcon leader evade right. Missile inbound. Al-Zahrani broke hard right, exactly as Soviet training prescribed. 7G turn, chaff and flares deploying. Counter maneuvers executed perfectly. For 1 second he thought he had evaded. The AIM-7 Sparrow tracked through his countermeasures. Advanced guidance system. Resistant to chaff. Home on jam capability. This was American missile technology at its peak. Impact. Al-Zahrani's MiG shuddered violently. Warning lights cascaded across his panel, hydraulic pressure dropping, flight control sluggish. The aircraft was dying. He fought for control, tried to maintain altitude, but the damage was catastrophic. Radio call to ground control. Falcon leader hit, aircraft failing, attempting. No response. Radio damaged or jammed. Emergency, ejection decision. Al-Zahrani reached for the handle. Pulled. Canopy explosive bolts fired. Rocket motor ignited. Crushing acceleration, then parachute deployment. Sudden silence after cockpit chaos. He floated down toward Lebanese territory. Below uncertain ground. Above his aircraft trailing fire spinning toward Earth. Last conscious thought before landing, I did everything right. Everything I was trained to do. It wasn't enough. David Weinstein watched the parachute descend. Splash 1, he reported. Professional. No celebration. This was combat, not sport. He'd just shot down a Syrian pilot. That pilot was someone's son, maybe someone's father. A professional warrior who trained hard and executed his mission with courage. But courage without adequate systems is insufficient. David's F-15 was untouched, had never been detected by Syrian radar, had engaged from beyond their effective response range, had dominated the engagement from beginning to end. Viper 1 RTB, returning to base. What happened to Al-Zahrani happened across Lebanon that day and the next. Syrian Air Force versus Israeli F-15s. The engagement wasn't close. Final tally, over 80 Syrian aircraft destroyed, 0 F-15Es lost. Not because Syrian pilots lacked courage, they had courage in abundance. Not because Syrian training was inadequate. It was rigorous and professional, but because they faced an integrated system they couldn't match. Better radar, longer range missiles, superior pilot training, AWACS support, better aircraft performance, American maintenance standards. Everything compounding. Moscow received the engagement reports within hours. Viktor Belov read them in his office. Each report confirmed predictions he'd made a decade earlier. He wasn't happy to be right. There's no satisfaction in accurate prediction of tragedy. He called his son Alexei, now a senior MiG-25 instructor, married, 2 young daughters, still flying though less frequently. Have you seen the Lebanon reports? I have, father. What do you think? Long silence on the line. Then I think Syrian pilots fought bravely and died anyway, because bravery isn't enough when you're outmatched systemically. Victor, yes. Alexei, would Soviet pilots do better in same situation? Victor chose words carefully. Soviet pilots are better trained than Syrians. Our aircraft are better maintained. Our support systems more developed. But the fundamental problem remains. We're facing integrated American system that performs beyond our current capacity to counter. Then what do? We accelerate our response programs. MiG-29 is finally reaching operational status. Su-27 following. We reform training doctrine. We invest in pilot autonomy and decision-making. And we hope if war comes, we're ready. But Victor knew. The gap remained, would remain for years. American aerospace industry had achieved something profound. Not just building better aircraft, building better systems, better integration, better training, better everything. Al-Zurani survived his ejection, captured by Israeli forces, eventually released in prisoner exchange 1985. He never flew combat again, became instructor instead. His students asked, what was it like facing the F-15? His answer became legend in Syrian Air Force circles. Honest, professional, tinged with respect for enemy capability. Imagine fighting an opponent who sees you before you see them, shoots before you can shoot, flies better than you can fly, knows where you are when you don't know where they are. That's not a fight. That's a lesson in technological superiority. The Americans built something we couldn't match. The Israelis used it perfectly. We paid the price. That honesty from a former enemy would matter later. But first, another generation had to learn similar lessons. Fast forward to 1989, Soviet Union entering its final years, though few realized it yet. Captain Yuri Petrov, 24 years old, represented a new generation of Soviet pilots. Viktor Belov's nephew, born 1965, never knew Stalin's era, grew up during Brezhnev's stagnation, came of age during Gorbachev's reforms. Unlike his uncle Viktor's generation, Yuri's cohort believed Soviet technology could compete. The years of setbacks seemed like temporary problems, not systemic failures. The MiG-29 was finally operational. Beautiful aircraft, agile, modern. The answer to F-15 dominance. Morning at Kubinka Air Base outside Moscow. Yuri woke at 5:30, cold water on his face. Hot water only available certain hours. Strong black tea in common mess. Black bread with butter, occasionally jam if supply was good. Soviet pilots didn't have American coffee culture, didn't have the informal camaraderie of American ready rooms. Soviet military culture was more formal, more hierarchical, but no less professional. This morning, Yuri would fly the MiG-29 Fulcrum, the aircraft designed specifically to counter the F-15 Eagle, Soviet response to American challenge, proof that Soviet aerospace could compete. Walking to flight line, Yuri studied his aircraft with pride. The MiG-29 was genuinely beautiful. Twin engines, sleek profile, incredibly agile. The helmet-mounted sight for R-73 missiles represented technology Americans didn't have yet. Soviet innovation, Soviet excellence. He believed in this aircraft. More than that, he believed the decade of setbacks was ending. Time to prove Soviet aviation competitive. His wife Katya had asked last night, why does it matter so much? Proving the MiG-29 can compete with American fighters. Yuri's answer came from his generation's pride. Because for 10 years, we've watched Americans dominate. F-15s in Lebanon, in Persian Gulf incidents, everywhere. Time to show Soviet engineering is equal. Pre-flight briefing. Colonel Dmitry Orlov, squadron commander, an Afghanistan veteran, ran the session. Today's exercise simulated intercept of high-speed targets. You'll be vectored by ground control. Follow their instructions precisely. Maintain formation discipline. Execute as directed. Standard Soviet doctrine. Centralized control. Trust the system. Ground controllers with radar coverage would direct fighters to targets. Pilots executed orders. Yuri and 3 other pilots received assignments. Everything scripted. Every move planned by ground control. Pilots as executors of centralized decision-making. Strapping into the MiG-29 cockpit, Yuri felt moment of doubt. Small thing, easily pushed aside. But there, flight hours this month 18, last month 15, month before 20. He'd heard through informal channels that American F-15 pilots flew 30 to 40 hours monthly. More realistic combat scenarios. More independence in decision-making. More opportunities to develop judgment under pressure. Yuri pushed the doubt aside, focused on mission. But the seed was planted. Airborne. The MiG-29 flew beautifully. Responsive. Powerful. Agile. Everything Soviet aerospace promised. Ground control Viper 2-1 turn heading 180. Targets at 50 kilometers. Yuri turned precisely. Radar searching. Picked up simulated targets. Other Soviet aircraft playing aggressor roles. Ground control Viper 2-1 maintain current heading. Prepare weapons employment on my command. Yuri had perfect firing solution already. Could engage now. But doctrine required ground control authorization. So he waited. Ground control Viper 2-1 standby. Delay. Maybe 10 seconds. In simulation, meaningless. In combat, potentially fatal. The enemy wouldn't wait for ground control authorization to kill you. Ground control Viper 2-1 cleared to engage. Yuri simulated missile launch. Perfect execution. By the book. But that 10-second delay haunted him. Debriefing. Colonel Orlov praised the mission. Textbook performance, Captain Petrov. You followed procedures perfectly. Yuri raised his hand. Sir, question. In combat, if ground control communications are jammed or delayed, what guidance exists for autonomous engagement? Orlov paused. You follow last received instruction until communications restore. Trust the system, Captain. Soviet integrated air defense gives ground control the bigger picture. Your job is executing their guidance. Yuri nodded, said nothing more. But doubt grew stronger. That weekend he visited Uncle Victor in Moscow. Victor, now 64, had retired from active intelligence work but still consulted. His small apartment overflowed with books, reports, photographs, spanning 4 decades of aviation analysis. Over vodka and pickled vegetables, traditional Russian hospitality, they talked. Uncle, the MiG-29 is excellent aircraft. You should see it fly. Victor poured vodka carefully. I've seen reports. It is excellent, beautiful, well-armed, maneuverable. But Victor raised his glass. They drank. The vodka burned clean. But aircraft is only part of system, Yuri. Americans don't just build good aircraft. They build good systems. Training that develops judgment. Logistics that maintain readiness. Doctrine that trusts pilots. Everything integrated. Soviet training is rigorous. Soviet training is excellent at teaching pilots to follow orders. American training teaches pilots to think, to make decisions, to exercise judgment supported by superior technology. Yuri felt defensive. You sound defeatist, Uncle. Victor's expression didn't change. I sound realistic. I've spent 30 years analyzing American aviation. They have advantages we haven't addressed, not because our people are less capable, but because our system works differently. Centralized versus distributed. Control versus initiative. Both have strengths, but in modern air combat, distributed decision-making supported by superior sensors wins. The conversation continued into evening. Victor showed Yuri his complete F-15 analysis. Decades of work. Predictions proven accurate. Warnings largely ignored. You think we'll lose? Yuri finally asked. I think that in air combat, better integrated systems defeat better individual components. Your MiG-29 might equal or exceed F-15 in specific parameters, but American pilots operate with more autonomy, More flight hours, better logistics, better maintenance. Those factors compound. Individual superiority becomes systemic advantage. Yuri left troubled. He wanted to prove Uncle Victor wrong, wanted to believe Soviet aviation had caught up. Within 2 years, Desert Storm would prove Uncle Victor right. Again. And Yuri would watch helpless as everything he believed was tested against reality and found insufficient. November 1990, Saudi Arabia. The desert stretched endlessly under a sky so blue it hurt to look at. Heat shimmered off the tarmac at Darwin Air Base, where American F-15s sat in perfect rows, each one maintained to specifications that would have seemed impossible to previous generations. Major Thomas Jefferson, callsign TJ, stood in the shadow of his aircraft's wing, seeking brief respite from the sun. 36 years old, African-American, grandson of a Tuskegee airman who'd fought for the right to fly when America didn't want black pilots. Son of an auto worker who'd spent 30 years on the Ford assembly line in Detroit building cars with the same precision his son now used to maintain combat readiness. TJ sipped water from a canteen. Not coffee, too hot for coffee, even terrible military coffee. The thermometer read 105 degrees Fahrenheit. This was Saudi summer extending into fall. This was heat that made flight suits stick to skin and turned aircraft cockpits into ovens until the air conditioning kicked in. But TJ didn't complain. His grandfather had flown P-51 Mustangs over Europe, facing flak and fighters and racism from his own military. His father had worked the night shift at Ford through Michigan winters and Detroit summers, never missing a day in 30 years. The Jefferson family understood duty, understood work, understood excellence regardless of conditions. Thanksgiving was 2 weeks away. The squadron had planned celebration, turkey shipped from the States, all the traditional sides, attempt to bring America to the Arabian desert, maintain morale, maintain connection to home. TJ thought about his wife Michelle and their 2 daughters back in Virginia. He'd written them yesterday, told them he was safe, told them he loved them, told them he was doing important work. Didn't tell them that war was coming. They knew anyway. Everyone knew. Everyone. Iraq had invaded Kuwait in August. Coalition forces had assembled in Saudi Arabia. Diplomatic efforts continued, but military preparations assumed diplomacy would fail. The buildup was massive, largest American military deployment since Vietnam, and at the center of air superiority planning, the F-15 Eagle. TJ walked around his aircraft performing informal inspection. His crew chief, Technical Sergeant Williams, kept this bird perfect. Every panel flush, every system operational, every weapon ready. Williams approached with a clipboard. "Sir, post-flight inspection complete. All systems green. She's ready whenever you are." "Thanks, Sergeant. How's the heat treating you?" Williams grinned. "Yeah, I grew up in Georgia. This is just Georgia in July with more sand." They both laughed, finding humor in difficult conditions. American military tradition as old as the military itself. Squadron briefing at 1600 hours. Intelligence update on Iraqi air defenses. The briefing room was crowded. F-15C pilots from multiple squadrons. The coalition air campaign was being planned in meticulous detail. Intelligence officer, a captain from Air Force Intelligence, ran through Iraqi air order of battle. Iraq possesses approximately 750 aircraft, mix of Soviet types, MiG-21, MiG-23, MiG-25, MiG-29. Some French Mirages. Their pilots are Soviet-trained. Many are veterans of the Iran-Iraq War. They have combat experience. The room paid attention. No one underestimated the enemy. Iraqi integrated air defense system is comprehensive. Soviet doctrine, surface-to-air missiles in depth, radar coverage, command and control nodes. It's designed to exactly counter the kind of air campaign we're planning. The intelligence officer paused, making eye contact around the room. But they're facing something they've never faced before. The full weight of American air power with AWACS support, stealth aircraft, precision weapons, and he gestured to the F-15 pilots, air superiority fighters that will own the sky from day one. TJ made notes. Iraqi MiG-29s concerned him most. Newer aircraft, capable. The Fulcrum had good performance characteristics. Helmet-mounted sight, agile, dangerous in close combat. But TJ had trained for exactly this. Countless hours in simulators. red flag exercises against aggressor squadrons, beyond visual range tactics, multi-aircraft coordination with AWACS. Every scenario practiced until it became instinct. After the briefing, TJ wrote another letter home. He did this every few days. Ritual. Connection. Dear Michelle and girls, Thanksgiving is coming. We'll celebrate it here as best we can. Turkey and all the fixings. The Air Force takes care of its people even in the desert. I think about Grandpa often, what he faced in his war, what Dad faced in his own while fighting for dignity and excellence on that assembly line. Their strength is with me. Their example guides me. I love you all. TJ, he sealed the letter, mailed it through military postal system, wondered when he'd see his family again. 6,000 miles away in Moscow, Yuri Petrov read intelligence reports about the coalition buildup in Saudi Arabia. His squadron wasn't deploying. Soviet Union in its final year, though, few realized it yet, was not involved in this conflict. But Soviet aircraft were. Soviet training was. Soviet doctrine was. Iraqi Air Force flew Soviet equipment, used Soviet tactics, had been trained by Soviet instructors. This would be test of everything Soviet aviation represented. Yuri knew what was coming, had known since his conversation with Uncle Victor. The Iraqi pilots were brave, skilled, professional, but they faced American integrated air power, F-15Es with AWACS support, beyond visual range missiles, superior radar, better training in autonomous decision-making. He wanted to be wrong, wanted Iraqi success to prove Soviet systems competitive. But he feared Uncle Victor would be proven right, again. January 17, 1991, 0300 hours local time. Operation Desert Storm began. TJ was airborne before dawn. His F-15C carried 4 AIM-7 Sparrow missiles and 4 AIM-9 Sidewinders. Full weapons load, full fuel, ready. The AWACS controller's voice was calm, professional. Pennzoil flight bandits bearing 030 Angels 2060 miles. Nearest package is Dodge engaged with separate group. You're clear to intercept. TJ's radar painted the contacts. 2 aircraft, based on radar signature and intelligence prep, probably MiG-29s. Iraqi interceptors scrambling to meet the coalition air campaign. Pennzoil has radar contact. 2 bandits, locked. Request weapons free. Weapons free Pennzoil, clear to engage. TJ selected an AIM-7 Sparrow. The radar lock was solid, range 40 miles. The Iraqi MiG-29s were still searching. Their radar was good, but not as good. Their tactics were Soviet doctrine. Wait for ground control vectors. Maintain formation, execute as directed. But ground control was being suppressed by coalition electronic warfare. Radar sites being struck. Command nodes being destroyed. The integrated air defense system was being dismantled, piece by piece. The Iraqi pilots were on their own, alone in their cockpits, flying expensive aircraft, carrying capable weapons, but without the system supporting them, without the training that emphasized autonomous decision-making, without the hundreds of hours practicing exactly this scenario. Fox 1, missile away. TJ watched on radar. The Sparrow tracked perfectly. The Iraqi MiG-29 started defensive maneuvers. Good moves. But the missile was already too close. Advanced guidance system. Countermeasures. This was American missile technology at its peak. Impact. The radar return disappeared. Splash 1. TJ felt no elation, just professional satisfaction at successful execution. That was someone's son down there, someone's husband or brother or father. An Iraqi pilot who trained hard and flown bravely and died before he even knew he was being engaged. But this was war, and in war, better systems determine survival. Over the next days and weeks, the story repeated. Iraqi aircraft rose to meet coalition air power. They fought bravely. They executed their training. They did everything their Soviet doctrine taught them. And they died. F-15S dominated. 36 air-to-air kills, 0 losses. The score wasn't close. Wasn't even competitive. This was systematic demonstration of American air superiority. One Iraqi MiG-29 pilot survived being shot down, ejected, captured. During intelligence debriefing, he was asked what it was like facing F-15 CES. His answer, translated from Arabic, echoed al-Zarani's words from Lebanon 9 years earlier. We never saw them. Radar warning, then missile. Everything we were taught, none of it worked. The Americans could see us. We could not see them. They could shoot us. We could not shoot them. This is not fighting. This is being hunted. In Moscow, Yuri watched. Each intelligence report confirmed his worst fears. MiG-29 sounds, the aircraft he flew, the Soviet answer to American F-15 dominance, were being destroyed with impunity. The Iraqi pilots weren't incompetent. The aircraft weren't inadequate in absolute terms. But relative performance matters. Systems matter. Integration matters. Training matters. All the factors Uncle Victor had identified. Yuri felt something crack inside. Everything he'd believed. Everything his generation had been told. Soviet aviation is competitive. Soviet training is rigorous. Soviet systems are adequate, all proven insufficient against American air power. He visited Uncle Victor in late January, found his uncle in his small apartment, surrounded by reports tracking Desert Storm developments with professional interest. Victor poured vodka without speaking. They drank in silence. Two professionals acknowledging truth too painful for casual words. Finally, Yuri spoke. You were right, about everything. Victor nodded slowly. I take no satisfaction in being right, nephew. I warned, I analyzed, I recommended. But the system couldn't adapt fast enough. Why couldn't we match them? Victor stood, walked to his window. Outside Moscow winter. Gray, cold. The Soviet Union entering its final year, though they sat in that apartment, not knowing it yet. It's not one thing, Yuri, it's everything. The Americans built integrated system. Better aircraft, yes, but also better training, better maintenance, better logistics, better doctrine that trusts pilots, better manufacturing that maintains quality at scale, better economy that can sustain the investment. Everything compounds. He turned back to his nephew. And there's something else, something I've been analyzing for months. The economic cost of trying to compete with American aerospace development. Victor pulled out a thick folder, his latest analysis, not yet submitted, maybe never to be submitted given the chaos in the Soviet government. The MiG-29 program, the Su-27 program, the attempts to match American developments. They cost us billions of rubles, billions we didn't have. Resources that could have gone to civilian economy, to infrastructure, to improving people's lives. Instead, we poured it into military aerospace, trying to match American programs that the American economy could sustain almost effortlessly. Yuri listened as his uncle explained. The burden of military spending, the opportunity costs, the economic strain of trying to match American aerospace development when Soviet economy was already struggling. The F-15 didn't cause Soviet economic problems, Victor said carefully. But it represents the pattern. Everything we tried to match, we couldn't afford. Not at American scale, not with American quality, not sustainably. The arms race was race we couldn't win economically. That evening, Victor received unexpected visitor, Colonel Mikhail Belov, now retired. The MiG-25 pilot who'd been so confident in 1972, now 61 years old. Gray, weathered, but still carrying himself with military bearing. They sat together, two old warriors drinking vodka and discussing Desert Storm. We built good aircraft, Victor, Belov said. The MiG-29 is a beautiful machine. The Su-27 can do maneuvers the F-15 cannot. Victor poured more vodka. In air shows, yes. The Pugachev's Cobra is impressive demonstration. But Desert Storm showed reality. Air combat isn't air show. It's systems competing. And their system is better integrated. Belov nodded, drank. I spent my career believing Soviet aviation was competitive. Believed in our training, our doctrine, our aircraft. Desert Storm proved me wrong. It proved the system wrong, Victor corrected gently. You and your fellow pilots are skilled. The aircraft are well designed within their parameters. But the overall system, the integration, the support structure, the doctrine, all of it together couldn't match what Americans built. They sat in silence, acknowledging 30 years of competition that had ended with clear victor. As weeks passed, Desert Storm continued demonstrating American air dominance. Coalition aircraft flew tens of thousands of sorties. Iraqi Air Force eventually stopped flying, retreated, fled to Iran, hid. The air campaign was textbook execution of overwhelming force applied with precision. And at the center of it, F-15 SOAS performing exactly as designed. Air superiority, unchallenged, absolute. TJ returned home to Virginia in March after the ceasefire. His daughters ran to meet him at the base. Michelle hugged him tight. He was thinner, sunburned, older somehow, despite only months away. That evening, family dinner. Traditional celebration. Michelle had made his favorites. Fried chicken, collard greens, cornbread, mac and cheese, pecan pie. All the things his grandmother used to make. Over dinner, his oldest daughter asked, "Daddy, were you scared?" TJ thought about that question. Chose his words carefully. Sometimes, but I had the best training, the best aircraft, the best people supporting me. Your great-grandpa flew over Germany with much less. He'd be proud of how far we've come. His father called that evening. The old Ford worker, retired now, living in Detroit. "Son, I heard about your air-to-air victory. The news covered it." "Just doing my job, Dad." "I know, but I want you to know something. All those years on the assembly line building cars, I was part of something. American manufacturing, American quality. You flew the F-15. That's the same thing, same country, same commitment to excellence, same belief that quality matters. I'm proud of you." TJ felt tears in his eyes. "Thanks, Dad. That means everything." Meanwhile, in Moscow, events were overtaking analysis. The Soviet economy was collapsing. Gorbachev's reforms had unleashed forces he couldn't control. The Warsaw Pact was dissolving. The Berlin Wall had fallen. The entire Soviet system was coming apart. Victor watched with mixture of sadness and inevitability. He'd spent his career serving Soviet Union. But he'd also spent that career seeing its limitations clearly. Desert Storm had been final demonstration, not just of military inadequacy, but of systemic failure. You cannot compete economically with a power that can casually deploy overwhelming force while maintaining prosperity at home. You cannot match industrial output when your factories struggle with basic quality control. You cannot sustain military spending that cripples civilian economy. December 25, 1991. Mikhail Gorbachev resigned. The Soviet flag was lowered from the Kremlin for the last time. After 69 years, the Soviet Union ceased to exist. Victor watched on television in his apartment. Yuri sat with him. 2 generations of Soviet military professionals watching their country dissolve. "What do we do now?" Yuri asked quietly. Victor poured vodka, raised his glass. "We learn. We acknowledge truth. We rebuild based on reality, not ideology." They drank. "The F-15 didn't cause this," Victor continued, "but it was part of the pattern. Everything we tried to match, we couldn't afford. The economic burden of competing with American aerospace with American military power generally contributed to strains that broke the system." He walked to his desk, pulled out his journals, decades of analysis, reports, predictions, warnings. "I wrote truth that Soviet system didn't want to hear. Maybe Russian system can hear it. Maybe we can learn." Yuri's young son, 10 years old, asked from doorway where he had been listening. "Grandfather, why did we lose?" Victor knelt down to boy's level, looked him in eyes. "We didn't lose war, child. We lost economic competition. The Americans built better systems, not just weapons, entire systems, manufacturing, training, logistics, everything integrated. That's what we need to learn from them." "Can we learn from our enemies?" Victor smiled sadly. "They're not our enemies anymore. And yes, we can learn. We must learn. That's how you become better. Study excellence wherever you find it. Respect it, learn from it, build on it." The boy nodded, not fully understanding, but sensing the importance. That night, after Yuri and his family left, Victor sat alone. 71 years old now, career spent analyzing American aviation, decades tracking one aircraft, the F-15, that had proven every one of his predictions correct. He wrote in his journal one more time. December 25, 1991. The Soviet Union is gone. I spent my career serving it, analyzing threats to it, warning about capabilities we couldn't match. The F-15 Eagle was greatest of those threats, not because it was invincible, but because it represented systemic American advantages we never overcame. I was right about everything. Take no satisfaction in this. Being right meant watching my country struggle economically while trying to match American aerospace development. Meant watching brave pilots face systems they couldn't overcome. Meant watching the gap widen despite our best efforts. The F-15 will continue flying. Maybe another 20 years, maybe more. Undefeated in combat, perfect record, testament to American aerospace excellence. What I wonder now, in this new world with Cold War over, can former enemies learn from each other? Can we set aside ideology and acknowledge that excellence exists, that some approaches work better than others, that systems matter as much as individual brilliance? I hope so, because that would give meaning to my career, not just analyzing an enemy, but understanding what makes excellence possible. And maybe in some small way helping my country learn from that understanding. Victor closed his journal, looked at photographs on his wall. His wife Elena gone 9 years now. His son Alexei now a civilian flight instructor. His grandson Yuri's son, who might grow up in a world where former enemies could be colleagues. Outside Moscow, winter deepened, but inside small warmth. Not from heat, but from hope. Hope that understanding could replace ideology. That respect could replace enmity. That former adversaries could acknowledge each other's achievements. The F-15 had dominated its era completely. Reshaped strategic balance, contributed in its way to economic pressures that helped end the Cold War. But maybe its greatest achievement was still to come. Not in combat, but in teaching lessons about excellence that transcended conflict. Victor thought about Tex Mitchell, the American test pilot, whose career he'd tracked through intelligence reports. About Bobby Chen, the engineer whose family had fled China for American opportunity. About TJ, grandson of Tuskegee Airmen, carrying forward legacy of American excellence. Professional respect. That's what Victor felt. Respect for adversaries who'd built something magnificent and used it effectively. Respect for system that could sustain excellence over decades. Respect for values that emphasize quality, innovation, individual initiative. Maybe someday he could tell them that their work, their excellence, had been acknowledged even by the enemy who spent career trying to counter it. Maybe in this new world that conversation was possible. Victor finished his vodka, prepared for bed. Tomorrow would bring new uncertainties. Russia was born today from Soviet collapse. What it would become, no one knew. But Victor knew one thing with certainty gained from 40 years of professional analysis. Excellence recognizes excellence. Truth transcends ideology. And the F-15 Eagle, the aircraft he'd first seen in a photograph in 1972, represented truths about systematic excellence that no political system could deny. Those truths would outlast the Cold War, would outlast the Soviet Union, would outlast individual careers and national conflicts. Because excellence, real excellence, endures. And sometimes the greatest honor is acknowledging it in your opponent.